So let's suppose we want to do something immediate about income inequality. In the long term, both conservatives and liberals, everybody agrees that improving the education system is the key to addressing structural inequality, income inequality in the United States. That's a pretty hard task, and it also is a really long-term project, so we're still working on that one. Anyway, if you want to do something about it in the short run, then you're in a ballpark where we're going to have to think about transferring income from the rich to the poor. And this gets to be a problem because if you tax the rich and give money to the poor, you reduce the benefit of becoming rich, and there's some disincentive to work hard. And let's say you've got rich people that just are living off investment earnings, as they can do because they're rich. Putting your wealth up, investing it in potentially productive projects is really good for the economy and for the investors. And if you tax that, then you reduce the incentive to do that. On the low end, if you're getting benefits in the mail, then you have a disincentive to work. So what are we going to do? And can we do something that's going to help the poor without harming overly much the rich or reducing the incentive to work on the part of the poor? All right, what can you think about doing? One thing you can do is have in-kind transfers or cash transfers. A lot of conservative economists that argue that, hey, if you're going to help the poor, at least just give them cash so they can make their own decisions about whether they want to spend it on food or shelter or clothes or whatever. They know best their problem. But nevertheless, there's a paternalistic approach to many welfare programs. So we worry about people are going to go buy alcohol or drugs. And so if we just give them money, so we're going to give them food stamps. And so we give them food stamps for food, rent vouchers for rent. There's probably a couple other vouchers I'm forgetting about. But, health care, we give them health care, but not cash to buy health care. Anyway, so these are the kinds of transfers. One problem that we get especially when we have means testing, right? We don't want to just give out food stamps to everybody or free health care to everybody. At least, some countries do it that way. We don't. Rent vouchers to everybody. No, we've got to only give those to the poor. Well, that makes sense, right? Well, unfortunately, when we have means-tested programs, we create these thresholds where, if you're below the threshold, you have the aid, and if you're above the threshold, you don't. But also, as we reduce the benefits across a multitude of means-tested programs, we can actually be imposing marginal tax rates on work effort for the poor that exceed 100%. If you were going to go and work for 3 hours and bring in $30 worth of cash, but lose $50 worth of benefits, are you really going to work and make your family $20 worse off? This is the kind of situation that's created by some of the means testing that we do for programs. So it's a challenge that we as an economy have to deal with. Well, as we design ways to assist the poor, we have to take that into consideration. I have this chart that got sort of blown up too much by my presentation software. I couldn't change the scaling. Anyway, it's we see this trend that between 1972 and 2007, we had a somewhat flat share of the GDP. This is, by the way, about 1% of GDP spent on these means-tested programs. But that really jumped with the Great Recession, and only now if we had seen all the way out to I think this is a forecast to 2022, we're forecast to be back down around the trend line. Anyway, the means testing, welfare programs, in-kind transfers in particular, really can create a severe disincentive to work, and that's exactly what we don't want to do to help the poor, right? We want to assist them getting back to work and learning new skills and having the pride of going off to work and earning for themselves. It's a huge part of our identity as humans and as Americans in particular. Work is much more closely tied to American self-perception than it seems to be elsewhere. There's been some empirical work done on this question. I saw that when I was a student in Spain and my first job was in Spain. It just, identity wasn't so tied up with your occupation as it in Spain as it is here. At least not back then. It's been a while. I was a student there in the early 80s. To avoid creating the disincentive but still help the poor, Milton Friedman is somewhat famous for having proposed a tax overhaul. He claimed he could write out a better U.S. tax code on the back of a napkin than what we have in the volumes and volumes and volumes and volumes that presents our tax code and the law. And a key feature of that program, he suggested, was just have a negative income tax. So if your income is below, say, the poverty line, well, instead of paying taxes in, you get a check from the government. And as you go back to work, that check gets smaller by some reasonable amount. If it's a 15% marginal tax rate, if you earned an extra dollar as a poor person, you'd lose 15 cents of the check you got from the government. And then somewhere around the poverty line, there'd be no zero tax liability. You don't get any check and you don't pay any taxes in. And then as you earn more income, you'd pay some share of your income in. This was Milton Friedman's negative income tax. Interestingly, this is an idea that's been embraced by some on the left as well as on the right. But actually, I think Richard Nixon actually tried to get a negative income tax program through and failed, although it's something that a lot of people both on the right and the left of the political spectrum recognize as an improvement to the current system. Other ways to help the poor, minimum wage laws are in the news quite a bit. And this is a graphic. Again, my image got trimmed by the presentation software. This is from the Economic Policy Institute, which is a liberal think tank in Washington, D.C. One of the problems that a lot of people see with minimum wage laws is that it really makes it hard to employ low productivity workers like teenagers who really could benefit from the work experience and really don't particularly need the help. Now, the Economic Policy Institute presents this case that, hey, a lot of these minimum wage workers are 35 years old and are supporting families that depend on them, and okay, but certainly the problem with the minimum wage law is that it makes it expensive to employ people, and that could result in less employment. It's a pretty complex analysis. I don't like the simple supply-demand analysis presented in the text, but certainly minimum wage laws have the potential to help the poor, and although they also have the potential to introduce inefficiencies. And you might be able to help the poor more than you could, or at least as much as you could with minimum wage laws without creating those inefficiencies. So let's think about how we might do that. One alternative to minimum wage laws that don't create a disincentive to hire workers and in fact create an incentive to hire workers is the earned income tax credit. Here, low-income workers get not just a break on their taxes, but they actually get a supplement to their wages from the government. The government actually pays them money, and this program has the benefit of increasing the rewards of work, and thus it actually accelerates the process of getting people that are poor and out of work back into the workforce. And so again, this is a program that's been embraced by some conservatives as better than the minimum wage laws, but it's also a program that has been attacked in various efforts to trim the deficit, et cetera. But it does help the poor, and it creates an incentive to hire more labor instead of less labor. And there's a lot to argue in favor of the earned income tax credit. Another program, this was done a lot in the 30s to get the U.S. out of the Great Depression, and of course in the 40s the Government Works Program was the military and continues that way today. The government in times of recession could make an effort to just employ people that are out of work, and this is, ironically, both the right and the left coincide sometimes on this one. A lot of people point out that the government is hiring a lot of poor, less educated people and paying them and giving them skills through the Army. And that used to be a lot better argument before we ended up in wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But before 2002, say, a lot of young people went into the Army, never had to face bullets flying and learn some useful skills. And some argue that the government should have an employment program, don't pay people lavishly, but as a benchmark to help people that are out of work and aren't yet employable in the private sector. Well, the government could employ them, give them skills and experience, and send them back out to the private workforce capable of making a living on their own. And then Frank talks through this idea of a combination where the government could offer a negative income tax program in combination with public jobs. Neither program of its own would get anybody out of poverty, but a combination would. And then we wouldn't want to make the benefits of a public job to be so high that it would displace workers from the private sector, but as workers gained skills, they could transition into this private sector and make more money still. And obviously that's where Frank comes down on the best thing to do about the poverty problem. Notice that the negative income tax eliminates the disincentives to work that some of the means-tested welfare programs have, and then the public job component takes the issue of a disincentive to work completely out of the picture. Well, you're going to work. Either you work for a government job or you work for a private job. Government jobs don't pay as much, but we're not going to give you the money if you're not working for it. So that's the idea here. And I should mention that Paul Krugman has argued, mostly in the context of trade issues, but also in the context of fighting income inequality. Paul Krugman has argued that increasing public amenities would be the best way to help the poor and to relieve income inequality, to make income more equal without creating a disincentive to work. And here there's some things that are just good for everybody to have, rich or poor. We should just provide for everybody. And we pay for it out of taxes that are taxed in a progressive manner, income taxed in a progressive manner, but everybody has a right to and access to high quality health care. Everybody has access to high quality, relatively low cost education. And so when you're out of work, it doesn't mean your kids lose their opportunity to educate themselves and have a better life. If you get catastrophically sick, well, that's not going to bankrupt you. That's going to be there, rich, whether you have a job or not. Rich or poor. And yeah, your taxes would go up, but your healthcare premiums would disappear. Your tuition bills getting your kids through college would disappear. So, the net effect on even high income earners is arguably more friendly than high taxes that are used to fund transfers instead of, or other services. The high public amenities would benefit all taxpayers, rich and poor. Obviously, the rich would pay more because, in a progressive system or even in a proportional system.